Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing great and had a good Christmas. I hope you enjoyed these stories and have a brilliant new year. Take care. When I was about 10 or so, I went to go ice fishing with my dad, and it had snowed the night before, so you couldn't really see the ice. On our way out to the ice house, I ended up falling straight through an unmarked hole that had a very thin layer of ice covering it. The scariest part of this was instantly shutting down and sinking because of the cold. I could look up and see where I'd fallen through, but I couldn't swim. After a few seconds, I finally wheeled myself up and to the edge where my dad pulls me out. There's an abandoned house next to mine. The previous owner moved to California 25 years prior and never sold it. I got a flashlight, gloves, and pushed the window open to go inside, starting in the basement. In the basement there was a grand piano. It still plays, but very much out of tune. There's some old World War II stuff, what seems to be a signed Elvis poster, and other really cool stuff in there nobody should leave. There's basically a whole story in the basement, including a broken wedding picture frame and instruments everywhere. On the main floor was an unmade bed, moulded food in the fridge, half-empty beers and whatnot. The light's actually still on, never been turned off. Then I walked upstairs when I heard crying from one of the side rooms. I know for a fact there's literally nobody in there. That's when I freaked out and have never been back since. I lived in a house that had a really nice annex, or smaller house in the backyard. My grandparents usually lived there, but they had unfortunately passed away in recent years. Now one day I was home alone when I realised somebody's left the light on in there. I'm a bit annoyed because I don't want to go out in the cold and snow, also it's wasting electricity. So I get my coat on and head out. It's about a 500-meter walk, so it's quite a long way down there. I don't mind though. I feel a little bit relaxed, and to be honest it was quite pleasant in the snow. I can see footsteps that lead up to the back of the house, so I think that my brother's probably gone down there. Now, I step inside and realise that it's extremely cold. I know it's snowing, but it shouldn't be like this. I turn around to find where the light switch is, and the moment I raise my hand up, the light goes off on its own. I think this is a little odd, and I hear laughter coming. I realise that my youngest brother's playing a trick on me, and I say, "Ha, that's really funny. Enjoy being in the cold," and I go to leave. As I step outside, I realise that something's off. I can see a figure from my house, and I realise who it is. My oldest brother. Seconds later, my youngest brother appears too. I bolt out of there immediately, getting inside. I can barely get words out to say what happened. Neither of my brothers actually believe me, and it annoys me so much. They actually went out with me to investigate, and we couldn't find anyone in there. They think it was just me messing around or my mind playing tricks on me, but I know what happened to this day, and I've never been back in there since. My eldest brother, who unfortunately passed away, was almost a human killing machine. He could spot game other people couldn't see. Now one day, I was out hunting with him and he used my shoulder as a rest to kill a crow. I couldn't see this thing until it exploded. Now one day, we were out fox hunting. Foxes are very intelligent, and in the winter, sometimes you come across them sleeping on top of hills because the sunlight keeps them warm. So we're walking along and my brother stops and says, "Stop down," in a whisper. About 300 yards away is a fox curled up on a hill, so he lies down and prepares to take the shot. Just as he flipped the safety off, a second before pulling the trigger, the fox basically does a 180 on the snow, still as a ball. Turned out that the fox was actually a hat. Some idiot was wearing a fox hat and decided to drive on a snowmobile on someone else's property where we hunt. He was so lucky that my brother didn't take the shot. I was sitting in my room after getting out of work on the second floor. My little bro is downstairs watching TV. The dog is in the hallway outside my door sleeping. All of a sudden, the dog starts making all kinds of racket, jumping around, barking, clanking nails, howling. I get up to see what's going on and I hear, "Oh, that's a good girl," in a male voice. It didn't sound like my little brother, so I say, "Oh, you're home early," thinking it was my dad's friend or our roomie as I open the door. Soon as I'm there, there's no one at all but the dog waggling her tail, staring at an empty end of the hallway. My little bro comes upstairs to yell at me for getting his dog riled up, said he heard the same voice thinking it's our roommate. We did a once over at the house with my butterfly knife and his BB gun. Nobody was there whatsoever. I was about 7 years old. My brother was about 10. It was well past our bedtime when our mum woke up off the couch to put us to bed. Our dad worked from a construction area out of town, so it was usually just a couple of us at home. I mean the three of us. Up the stairs and to the immediate right was our parents' bedroom. Going left, it will put you in the middle of a hallway. Taking another left down that hallway led to my brother's room. The opposite end, which is my room, is across the hallway from our upstairs bathroom. At either end of the hallway are windowed doors which we always keep locked and rarely ever use. The door on my left actually led to the balcony overlooking our front yard, and the door on my brother's end opened up to the back porch. Now my mum and brother actually both have a habit of waking up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I only ever become aware of this due to the fact that I was such a light sleeper, and they just couldn't help flushing with the door open. This night, however, my brother stopped on his way to his room and came back towards the bathroom. I'm gonna try and pee before I go to bed. The past few nights I've been too afraid to walk to the bathroom alone. I keep seeing a man wearing stripes at the end of the hallway. I don't know if my mum wrote it off as my brother telling ghost stories trying to scare me, or if she was already half asleep and didn't catch it, but she didn't react at all to my brother's confusion. I, on the other hand, am absolutely terrified by this. The fear of seeing a ghost-like figure at the end of the hallway through the window absolutely terrifies me. Now, years later, when I was about 18, my mum and I were having a conversation in her car about a dog that we had for a very short amount of time. We were sharing stories about Max's tendency towards destroying my shoes and other unruly behaviours when my mum blurted out, "Do you remember that time I opened the front door for the cops and Max ran inside to the kitchen and started tearing open that big bag of dog food we had?" This really caught me by surprise because in all the years I lived in that house, we never once called the cops, gun-owning family in a quiet rural neighbourhood, etc. I said to her, "What is she talking about?" and she looked equally surprised, as if she just revealed something by accident. "Oh, that's right. I never told you because you were too young at the time. One night I woke up hearing noises outside my window, and when I looked outside, I saw a man staring into my bedroom." She went on to describe how turning on the lights caused him to take off running, and how she actually had to run and grab my dad's pistol before calling the police. I can't remember at all. I mean, I gave them details when they showed up. It's a tall white male, wearing a striped shirt and jeans and short dark hair, something like that. They said it matched the description of a man they were looking for in the area. It turns out that he had escaped from jail for murder. Now, it sounds so obvious hearing those two things together, but it wasn't until a few years ago, in my mid-20s, that I pieced together what my brother had unknowingly warned us about: a murderer who spent multiple nights staying in our home trying to avoid the police. I moved to my dad's when I was 10 and didn't know anyone in the area, except for the family my dad was friends with, a single mum with 3 kids. Luckily there was a girl a couple of years older than me, 12 at the time I met her, and we get to know each other. We weren't close but ended up having the same friends. One night my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They happened to be in the house alone because of my friend's mum being at work, which is where this gets terrifying and sad. Her mother had been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her fairly well. She found out that her sister was in a mental institution recently and was let out. The night Rob is hanging out with my friend, they get a knock on the door. They don't really think much of it, thinking it's just their mum, and answered it without thinking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there and he took off through the window down the road to his house. He never thought about it really, but it wasn't her mum. It was the sister of the lady her mum was helping, and she figured out from talking on later where her family lived and her mum's working schedule. She came in, and this is where I don't know the details and I'm glad I don't. My friend's younger brother got away to the neighbours to call the police. The lady had brutally murdered my friend a week before Christmas, hid her body, and they had to look through the presents, and I don't know where they found it, but they did. I wasn't even allowed to go to the funeral. A few years ago, I was home alone at night. I was watching TV in the living room when I heard the doorbell ring. Whenever I heard the door ring, especially when I'm home alone, I'm cautious to answer it. I walk up to the peephole without turning on the porch light, so they don't know if I'm actually in or not, which is smart, and look through. It's really dark, but I see a small figure move like a black blob. It's a definite shape, and it had to be around 3 or 4 feet tall, doing a circle dance, dipping down and oscillating its arms forward. Think of a person moving their arms like wings gracefully. It's dark outside, but this figure was more opaque, so I could see what's going on. After a few seconds, I stopped looking through the peephole because I'm so scared. I regained some courage and looked through again, but this thing is gone. To this day, I don't know what that is, and I still get freaked out by it. First off, I want to apologise because English isn't my native language, so sorry if my writing style seems a bit odd. So when I was in high school, I was not a very hard-working student, but I wasn't a troublemaker. I was just an incredibly lazy girl, working the minimum so that my parents wouldn't get angry at me. I always had some kind of easiness regarding schoolwork, and never knew what it truly meant to make effort, so I spent all my classes drawing onto my copybooks without making any true effort for real notes. Now, during my junior year, my maths teacher, who was seen by everybody as a very uptight but caring individual, was particularly upset about this, as many of my other teachers were. He wanted me to work harder. I mean, I wasn't bad at maths. I would usually achieve around 13 or 14 out of 20. Now I'm French, but I assume this is like a B- or something. But sometimes my grades are really low. During a teacher-parents meeting, he told my mum that I was wasting my capabilities, that it was infuriating how much I was lazy. My mum replied that she agreed and that he shouldn't blame himself but should try and push me harder and it'll be worth it. And he did exactly what she told. In every maths class, he would always question me first before anybody else, was always sitting right next to me, and during the test he would always tell me, "You can do it, you can do it." It made me feel incredibly uncomfortable because at this age, nobody wants the attention of the whole class on them. My class started realising that my maths teacher was a little obsessed with me and were teasing me about this. The last class before Christmas break, the maths teacher threw a little surprise party for Christmas. It was very nice, and he gave us chocolates and mock champagne, and we had a lot of fun. During the party, he pours me another glass of mock champagne, telling me that I deserve it because I was doing better. It was true. I was now getting about a 15 or 16, which is like having an A or so. I accept it, but didn't really drink too much. I have diabetes and already had far too much chocolate. But during the next class, I was feeling bad. I almost fainted and finished my last day of school before Christmas in the nurse's office. At that time, I wouldn't have even thought about it because of the alcohol-free champagne. I thought it was due to my diabetes that I ate too much chocolate. A few weeks later, my class threw some kind of charity event. It was a class project and we were very proud. In my country, we don't have proms, so it was an occasion to wear pretty formal clothes and dance together. The maths teacher was invited and he was helping some of the boys tend to the bar. He served me an alcohol-free cocktail, but before I drank it, a classmate of mine, Flora, poured some vodka in, even though it was forbidden to bring alcohol into the event. I was mad because with my diabetes, I couldn't drink alcohol, so I told her that I can't have it and just threw the cocktail. At the same time, I thought about it. She didn't really worry about me and I didn't like it. Now, the event ended pretty badly because of the alcohol Flora brought us. Some of the guys were very drunk and started breaking things. Flora passed out because of all the alcohol she had. This ended the event. Flora had been admitted to hospital because of her coma was pretty severe, and we spent the next few days being lectured regarding the dangers of alcohol. Not a good time, really. Flora got expelled from school and never went again. I was very upset with her because every event would now be completely different because of this. So I kind of ghosted her and never asked if she was doing better or anything. Now I feel bad about this, but at the time I was immature and young. But because of that, I will never know if she was ill because of the alcohol poisoning or because of my cocktail. A few weeks later, I failed a maths test. It had been a long time since I failed a maths test and the teacher was angry. He yelled at me in front of everyone saying how much of a disappointment I was and that I would end up living in a cardboard box under a bridge. Something's off. I was feeling unwell. He had a very weird look in his eyes and it gives me chills and I can't help but cry. He calmed down a bit and said he would just give me an hour of detention, during which I will get the joy of copying everything from the lesson. I was a little surprised because normally detention is for bad behaviour, not for bad grades, but I was a little relieved because it was a small punishment. My parents would never know. Indeed, I lived kind of far from my high school and there were only one or so buses every so often. Because of that, even if I finished at 4, I would never get home before 5. And if I've had a detention between 4 or 5, my parents won't know. But then, when he officially gave me the detention hour, he said that he wanted to be personally present during this and that the only possibility was for it to be between 5 and 6. I was nervous because now my parents are gonna know. As I said earlier, I wasn't a troublemaker, so at first I planned to go to detention hour, but during the day, my friends and I talked about it a lot. I was feeling more rebellious, so I decided not to tell my parents that I was in detention and that one of my friends would pick me up at 6 and drive me home. At 5 PM, when heading towards the detention room, I was angry, mumbling that it's not fair for me to have a detention because of one thing, one bad grade. When I arrived in the detention room, I was the only one waiting. I realised then that I would be the only student in detention alone with that maths teacher who was a little obsessive, and it was getting dark outside. It's a big no for me when I saw him come in. I panic. I said, "I'm sorry, I have an emergency, and now I'll email the school for rescheduling the detention," and I ran. He started to yell at me. that I had to obey him, and then he would call my parents, but I don't care. I sprint towards the bus to catch my bus. I was afraid that he would have to call my parents, so when I arrived, I was shaken. But my parents greet me normally. He didn't call them. He never came back the next day, actually over weeks. Eventually, I learned that he quitted his position. A shrink came during an hour to ask us if we wanted to talk about the maths teacher, but as nobody knew him that well or what was going on with him, we didn't have much to say. Until a few months later, that was until a few months ago, I become a teacher. How ironic given my laziness as a teenager. And one day while talking with my co-worker, I mentioned his name, talking about his weird bizarre behaviours that just didn't seem right, and one of my oldest co-workers went very pale hearing his name. In fact, a few days after the detention incident occurred, my maths teacher was arrested for having very bad videos downloaded onto his laptop from the dark web, and weird movies starring very young children. Maybe this detention hour was just a detention hour and I would have got out normally, but I will never know, and always wonder what would have happened if I had stayed.